Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So I want to start off asking who in the room has a replacement in place? One. And have you had it for quite some time where you've actually executed on that replacement plan?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Okay, good. So this presentation, I'm going to focus a little bit on replacement plans. Tomorrow, Carol and I are presenting more of a workshop style where you can get your hands dirty and actually create a replacement plan. But this is really going to go over the execution of it and kind of the model that we have at ProHealth that supports the execution of our replacement plans. So just to give you a little bit of information about us, ProHealth, we're a small community-based hospital in Waukesha County in Wisconsin. It's a suburb of Milwaukee. Just some stats we're not huge by any means, 4 hospitals, 15 clinics. We also have some multiple joint ventures and partnerships with fellow organizations in the state. Breakdown of our team. So you'll see we're heavy on the biomed side. We've got a manager, supervisor, our techs, imaging, something that's a little unique to our department, our organization. We have an operations specialist, a procurement specialist. So operations is more of that day-to-day. Procurement, we have a person who is solely focused on sourcing parts on the third-party market and also sending out and managing our repairs. We also have on the imaging side our various levels of techs. We've got a security DBA who is focused on cybersecurity, and we have 2 integration analysts. One is focused on our RTLS system. For those of you who aren't familiar with that, it's real-time location services, so it tracks our medical equipment throughout our hospitals. And the other one is integration from like patient monitor into Epic or images into PACS, those different integrations with medical equipment. And then on the HTM side, we've got myself as the program manager. We have a project manager and a project coordinator. So when I started 7 years ago in the department, I managed both capital replacements and projects, but the organization started getting a little crazy with the amount of projects, and we were showing the value in our capital planning, and it just became too much. So we split the duties. I'm more focused now on capital planning, but I do have oversight for the project manager and the project coordinator just because that's my wheelhouse and my history. We also have our biomed DBA who manages our inventory system. And then we have an equipment lifecycle planner. So we go from procuring the equipment all the way to the disposition of the equipment. If we are looking at replacing something, we want to understand what the trade-in value is, but we also want the right to try and sell that outright. And that's his job, to try and get us the best price. So going in, oh, yep. Database administrator. Yep. Oh, and please, if you've got questions throughout, don't feel that you have to hold until the end. Ask away. So getting into a little bit of replacement plans, what is a replacement plan? So it's essentially a schedule that's showing you when your equipment should be replaced. It's also a tool that's going to help facilitate, support some conversations, and those conversations could be with radiology leadership, right? Not just on the imaging side. I have all of the imaging modalities, but I have about 25 modalities on the biomed side, ranging from pulse ox thermometers all the way up to our surgical robots. So it runs the gambit. So any of those operational leadership conversations, it helps support that. With our organization structure, I report to our director, who reports directly to the C-suite. And unfortunately, fortunately, the C-suite knows my name, and I meet with them, and we go over what my replacement plan looks like so that they understand what the next 5 to 7 years looks like, right? It's not just the upcoming year, so that when they tell me no, they know what that means for the next couple of years of me figuring out where something needs to go. And it's also a means to help support organizational goals and initiatives. What I mean by that, a couple of years ago, we had things up on the docket for replacement, but we were building a new hospital. You can't spend that money on a new hospital and put your resources there necessarily and still be as advantageous as we are with our replacement plan, right? Something's got to give. Or during COVID, obviously things got paused, right? A lot of spend was halted. You then play catch up. And with that, we're not the only ones playing catch up. Facilities is playing catch up, right? Hospitals, clinics need new roofs or an HVAC system, right? And you can't do it all in 1 year. So sometimes to support what the organization wants to focus on that year means we may need to defer something. So it's all about that conversation. A lot of organizations still don't have replacement plans, although I will say it's been refreshing to see over the last few years this topic being quite popular at conferences. So it's starting to shift, but historically healthcare is a reactive mindset, right? Having a replacement plan means that you're being proactive, and that's different than what we're used to. And then also a lack of understanding, and it's not a lack of understanding the value per se, but it could be a lack of understanding what do you all have for equipment? What's the age of that equipment? How much is it getting utilized? Is there favoritism with one versus the other, right? It's all part of that having a conversation to understand what is the bigger picture. And some of those benefits, standardization. Not just from a leveraging capital purchase perspective is standardization good, but from a rad tech's perspective, right? You look at, let's say, X-ray. That user interface might be similar between portable and fixed. Is there a benefit to standardize to one vendor there? Are other workflows, or maybe you have one hospital who is using XYZ as a vendor and another one that's using ABC, right? And those techs float. Where's that standardization then for them? Cost avoidance. So I mentioned, if you're going to standardize with one vendor, negotiate that way. Don't look at just what that one purchase is, that one CT or MR the next year. What do you have for the next 3 years, right? Or maybe it's not just one modality that you have with that vendor. Maybe your MR and your CT vendor are the same. Leverage that for better pricing. Not only from the capital side, but from the service side too, depending on what your program looks like. Again, we're in-house, but you know, if you've got a service contract, negotiate for that. They help plant the seed with senior leadership. So like I said, we report straight up into the C-suite. We have that conversation. Brad tells me, Lani, the organization doesn't have an appetite this year for that, right? And I'm showing the cost of the equipment. I'm not showing the cost of construction, which is a huge expense. That's not getting any cheaper, right? So showing them the next few years, and I just had this in the last 2 weeks, I might be only asking for $6.5 million for this next fiscal year, and actually I'm doing that right now. But you're gonna see in fiscal year 28, 29, 30, because we kicked the can down the road so far, I'm asking for $14 million. And that's not including construction, right? Or improvements that are needed for an HVAC or an air handling unit, right, for the HVAC system. So it gives them a picture, prepares them, it plants the seed, so when the time comes, they're more apt to say yes than no. And it's a relationship builder, and we'll kind of get into that a little later, but you have a replacement plan, but it's not just biomed or HTM. You're working with your purchasing department, right, for leveraging that negotiation. You're working with construction services or facilities to understand the facility impact, right, that needs to happen. You're working with your IT department, PACS, to understand what might need to change there, right? There are lots of conversations that need to happen outside of just biomed and HTM. So it helps build that relationship. So you got that? So kind of went into it. These are those stakeholders, right, that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. So you've got biomed and HTM, right? We're providing our information as how best can we service the equipment? Are we not able to service it anymore? Are we not able to get parts on the third-party market? Okay, we need to prioritize that a little differently. Repair costs, cybersecurity risk concerns. So I work with our cybersecurity person, understand what's Windows 7. What was that cath lab that we replaced that may have been Windows NT still, right? Or hearing from IT of, hey, you're still running SQL 2014, let's get on 2019. Okay, that was supposed to be done last July. And then again, the standardization. And I didn't mention it before, but obviously the standardization from a biomed or an imaging tech's perspective, right? You really do become a SME if you're standardized to all of GE with one modality, or Siemens or Philips or what have you. You really are able to troubleshoot better, faster, more efficiently, have that conversation with operations. Do you have a question? Oh, okay. Operational leaders. We talk about downtime, technology, standardization, right? I have lots of conversations with our director of radiology. Some are wonderful conversations, some not so much. But we need to have the conversation, right? Senior executives, no one into that already. Our senior exec, Brad, he sees my next 7 years of what that spend is. And I will say, even on the biomed equipment side, there are certain modalities that I don't request, but I give him a line of sight to. There are strategic conversations, physician drivers for when we're going to replace our surgical robots. I'm not part of those. I don't need to be part of those conversations, but I want you to have insight of what this $2 to $3 million investment is going to look like for the fleet next 5 to 7 years, so that you are not caught off guard when a physician goes into the CEO office and says, hey, we need a new robot. Construction services. We'll go into this a little bit later on, but we've really developed over the last couple of years a really good process with our construction services team that goes from when we plan for capital and understanding what the construction costs are and putting that budget together, to when we're actually executing the plan and working with them. And then contractors, right? We need to understand what that project scope is. What's the design? What do we need from the vendor? Your prelim site specifics, right? And then once you hone what that final design of the room should look like, what's your final site specifics, so that we make sure we're running the right conduits, we're planning for the right power, equipment room is sized correctly, we're you know, our air handling unit can manage all the outcome of that. Cost estimates, vendor equipment analysis. So again, it's not just biomed HTM with that plan, and it's also not just biomed with the execution. All of these players come back into the picture once we execute. So replacement plan. This is what this was last year. These figures have actually jumped up a little bit. I was able to defer some things, but you can see 14 million. I'm down to $7 million for 27, so that 6 million needed to go somewhere, right? So I think I plopped it here in 29, and 30 went up a little bit too when I redid it. But it gives them a picture of the modalities. Here's what we're guesstimating for an equipment cost, but again, doesn't include construction. So when you're looking at me asking for $14 million, expect probably another 3 to 5 on construction, depending on the extent of what renovation of the room needs to happen. So gives them some insight. So we have our plan, but we need to move to executing the plan, right? It's great to have a plan, but you actually want to do something with it. So where we transition to our project team, teaching our project manager. She runs all of our projects. It was just her and I, and then we added our project coordinator to help out with some of those tasks as well, because we now have a 3-year project that is replacing some medical equipment in IR room, our hybrid room in the OR, but we're also completely renovating and building new ORs, 15 of them. We're consolidating our prep recovery and cath lab holding into one shared space. We're moving our PACU to account for some of that. We're building a second floor where administrative spaces can go. It's a undertaking, and it's going to be 3 years, right? So you need help with that. It's actually more difficult to do a renovation than a net new space, because now you also have to take into consideration what is all that existing equipment that I need to move somewhere when you're in that space, and how do you account for where it is so that the biomed or the imaging tech who needs to do the PM knows where the heck it is, right? So there's a lot of planning that needs to happen, especially in a project of that size. And then we get to our execution. This is a snippet. Right now we've got 6 active projects. From a project management perspective, the rule of thumb usually is if you've got a really large project, you should only have that project. So technically, Rachel, our project manager, should only have the surgical renovation project, but she has 5 other projects that she's managing, all of different size and magnitude. We have 4 part projects, and I'll say it's probably turning into 5 here, based on what we're hearing come out of capital. Leaders have reached out to say, oh, we want to add some med gases to do an integrated NICU model at one of the hospitals. It's not just med gases. What do you need from a flow meter, suction regulator? What do you need from a care station? Things like care for it. Oh, you want to renovate another clinic? Great. What do we need to do there? So there are lots of projects that are in flight for us, and we haven't gotten to the part yet where we're doing our cross-functional review with capital. So I'm sure that there's some other projects looming out there that we're just not aware of yet. Like I said, our project timelines, they're going to range. Few months, not too bad, right? Changing out a cath lab or an IR. But then you've got our big surgical renovation, or when we were doing our new hospital a couple years ago. That was multiple years of work. The collaboration with your external stakeholders, and there are a lot of them, and you might wonder, well, how many? You've got your general contractor, you've got the mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineer, you have, depending on the space, right, booms and lights vendor, you have the OEM that you're buying the piece of equipment from, you have your architect, you have all of your, and I'll say with the surgical suite, we're also redoing our entire sterile processing area. So the vendors that are involved there, it starts adding up the larger the project is, and it becomes a little more challenging to manage, especially depending on the pace of the project. Procuring equipment from 30+ vendors, not uncommon. Trying to keep it all straight. We meet on a weekly basis, the 3 of us gals, and we talk through what does that timeline look like? When do we need to start ordering? We're already projecting out for projects where we won't need equipment until the end of this year. Great, we're going to start ordering in April or May. What does that mean though from an equipment perspective? Some of that stuff you can work with your vendors and delay delivery. Some of it, for instance, our sterile processing, we purchased all of our stairs equipment under a group buy. Requirement of that group buy is we have to take delivery by March 15th. Guess what? We're not starting those phases until June. So let's figure it out. Oh, and let's have that conversation of when warranty is really going to start, because it's not starting in March. Those conversations that you need to have, right? Depending on the size of your project, you may only have a handful of vendors. But as you get larger, more complex, 30 plus, easily. So it's a lot of management. And then we have 4 approved projects for next fiscal year, actually, that are not a part of my replacement plan. So I'll just drop these down so we can read through them. So kind of our process in project management, you have 5 phases. Initiation, planning, execution, monitor, control, and closure. So your initiation, that's where your project is really getting defined, right? What are the objectives? What do we want this to look like? I know it's an imaging conference, but we literally did a walkthrough to move our respiratory therapy department, build them new space, right? What is that scope? What does that room look like? We're identifying those stakeholders as well in initiation. Who all needs a seat at that table? So think about that as we went back to the stakeholders, right? Do you need IT at the table? Do you need construction services at the table? Are there any vendors that you want at the table right away too, to make sure that you're configuring the system the way that you need to? I know we try, in our world, we try and standardize cath labs as best as we can, but let me tell you, that is the conversation that takes weeks every single time, and every single time we're scratching our heads of why we should be standardizing. I know you've never heard of this, right? But there's a physician who didn't want to do it one way, but now wants to do it another way, hence the conversation. So it's all that planning, and replacement plans help with that, right? You've got an idea when you're looking at that equipment. If you know the organization, you know your buildings, right? I know that some of my rooms are going to be older than others, and it's not just an equipment replacement, it's an actual room refresh because it's aging, and those are the times that we leverage those room refreshes is when we're replacing. Planning. So that's where we're working really with construction services, and we'll just hone in on imaging. Outside of like portable x-ray, ultrasound, almost everything has a construction component to it when you're going to replace it. So it's having that plan, right? What does that look like? Should we start this based on what we know? So that kind of leads into my comment earlier about me working with construction services, plan my capital. I meet with them in September, October, and go through what I'm going to be requesting the next year. And we're engaging our general contractor, any of our architects that are needed potentially. We're engaging engineers, and we're mapping that through, right? What needs to go to DHS? How long do we think construction is going to take? What is the lead time of the equipment? Let's start backing into all of that, and let's put it together so we understand what that timeline is. It's that timeline as well that I show in a cash flow that I send to my C-suite, and I also send to finance. So they understand what month am I going to be asking them to commit dollars on the books, and when is that month or 2 months, depending on your payment terms, cash is out the door. So we're mapping that out, construction services and myself, and providing all of that information so the organization is aware. Execution, that's where we're going to carry out the project, right? That's where we're making sure that we're going to be completing tasks on time. We know what our tasks are, right? Who's responsible for that task? It may not be you. It might be IT, it might be construction services, it might be a vendor. But lay it all out. That way you don't have to scratch your head later and try and remember something that you probably forgot. Also, that's the time that we're going to look at equipment removal. Based on the timeline, when do I need to remove equipment in order to allow construction to happen? Who do I need to line up for that? Am I actually going to trade in the equipment and the vendor is going to deinstall? Or has our equipment planner found a buyer and we need to coordinate them to come in and deinstall the equipment? How long is that going to take, right? Miscellaneous equipment procurement. So it may not be that large MR, right? But maybe there's some wall-mounted items that you need. Think of your patient transfer board, right? The bracket that goes on the patient transfer that it hangs on, emesis bag holder, hand sanitizer. So let me kind of put it in perspective. When we do our equipment list, and again, this is a little different to our program, I don't just build out the equipment itself. When we're in execution mode, we're building out everything that is needed for that room. And we have placeholders as well. If there's a furniture item or an IT item, I don't procure that, I don't provide budget for that, but I keep it in the line item so that our architect can account for it spatially as we go through our design meetings. So it's something to think about. Now, I don't say you all need to get to that level, right? That can be a lot. But as you mature in your program, that is something to keep in the back of your head of how granular do you want to get. Project and budget updates. So our project manager, she's reporting out on how projects are going. What are some of those roadblocks that she's running into? What are some of those things that I need to escalate for her and engage some other leaders to figure out an answer to, right? Maybe it's even on the construction services or on the general contractor side, but we need to escalate somewhere. Or the vendor. I know the vendor always gives you the information exactly when you need it, but in case it doesn't happen, who do you need to escalate to, right? And then equipment installs. So Rachel, she manages it all, and we'll kind of show on our work breakdown structure how she manages all of that information. So then we move into monitor and control. That's where we're in flight, right? We're in the midst of it all. We're monitoring our project. Is it on time? Is it on budget? Are we running into any hiccups that we need to address? Have some conversation, pull conversation together, right, to work through a challenge. We're having our OAC meetings. So on almost all of our projects that have our general contractor, we have weekly or bi-weekly OAC meetings. Owner, architect, construction, or contract meetings, right? We're talking through all of that to understand what's the next 4-week lookout look like? What roadblocks are we running into? What conditions do we need to have? Going back to sterile processing with our surgical renovation project, guess who had to have the conversation with them that, hey, there's going to be a plumbing shutdown. Surprised you won't be able to use your cart washer, sterilizer, right? Your regular washer, your sinks. What does that look like? What's the best time? What's the best day of the week? Sometimes you get roped into those conversations and you just have to manage them. Internal project manager meetings. We don't do this on every single project depending on the size, but the larger ones we do. So on a weekly Monday afternoon, construction project manager, IT project manager, our project manager and coordinator and myself all hop on a 30-minute call and we talk through the project so that we're all on the same page. It's a great way for the 5, 6 of us just to understand what have we discussed this last week in the various meetings. What do we need to march to in the next couple of weeks that maybe wasn't called out? It's a sidebar conversation, right? An offline conversation. But we can also prevent some or communicate some of the things that we're running up against, right? Or maybe we need some clarification on. So we really do look at just having an internal project manager meeting just to make sure that we're all in alignment. Let's see, equipment deliveries. So again, Rachel, she manages those equipment deliveries when they're going to take place, what's needed. We'll work with our contractor for that as well. Does an electrician need to be on site? Does a plumber need to be on site? Installs usually go well, but not always, right? There's some hiccups that happen. So any of those hiccups she manages as well. Schedule variances, they happen. Anytime that you have construction, know that that schedule that you see initially is not the schedule that will hold true. It will always change. It may not change drastically, but it's probably going to change. DHS isn't necessarily going to take the 30 days to approve what you submitted, right? They could take 45. Guess what? The inspector may not show up when he actually said that he was going to show up, and it's a week or 2 later. Oh, when we did our hospital a couple of years ago, the inspector wanted all of the equipment that had an electrical component that would be in the OR so that he could look at the UL listing tag, only to show up a month later when he was going to check those and not step foot into the ORs that we had mocked up. So you've got schedule variances, you're going to have them. It's okay to have them. Just know that they're gonna happen. And then we have an issue tracker that we utilize as well. Typically, we'll utilize that after go live. You would love for a piece of equipment out of the gate to not have any issues. That doesn't always go to plan. And we've recently had some installs on fixed X-ray that were so bad, we have probably 2 pages worth of issues that we were managing to, and that was only within probably 2 months of us having the first fixed X-ray. And we were really trying we had, but we were trying to figure out how we out of next 2 purchases that were to get out of the far down the path. So it then of preparing that whatever were identified cause software issues, and I'd say about 80% of them were software. So make sure on the software that you're loading on the next 2 doesn't happen again. And they actually went back to their national product development, who was based out of, I think, Sweden, and changed it for the entire global market, reverted back to an old version. Still ran into issues with number 2 and number 3. Hence, we're going through an RFP and we're no longer using that vendor for X-ray. But issues happen. And then we get into closure. That's where we're delivering the final product, right? We formally complete that product, the project. We're going to document our lessons learned. I will be very transparent. In our world, we do not necessarily do a great job at lessons learned. That's something that I want our group to improve on, because at the start of a project that is similar in nature, you should go back to the last project to review the lessons learned so that you don't repeat. Like I said, that's a goal, an area of improvement that I recognize that we need to get better on. One thing that we learned the hard way for any of our medical equipment, and I'm talking the major stuff, mainly on the imaging side. When we go live, your vendor is going to process the final invoice and send to you. We no longer pay that final invoice until we have sign off from operational leadership saying that everything on that system is functioning the way it's intended, that there are no outstanding issues. That's when we will pay that final invoice. If they are experiencing any issues or feel that they need to be retrained on something, we hold that payment and force the vendor to rectify. So that's a key takeaway that I would highly recommend is from that last invoice. Because unfortunately, payment is what vendors will react to. Oh. So again, this is just another slide kind of showing project stakeholders. The one difference in this one is purchasing. So purchasing, when I'm putting together my replacement plans, I would engage them. The only time that I would engage them is if I know historically of group buys that particular OEM does, and I want to look at our Vizient contract and what the upcoming group buys are going to be to kind of map out when my cash flow would be for them. Otherwise, I'm not purchasing until it's time to negotiate and purchase, right? We're going to make sure that purchasing is helping us adhere to our standards. And it may not be a standard model for a modality like MR. We have a standard vendor, but we have different models based on the need, right? CT, standard vendor, different models depending on if it's more cardiac focused, is it stroke focused, is it just general CT? Is it a CT that we're getting for IR to use because we're tired of them using up our other 2 CTs that we're using for stroke or cardiac, right? So it's all that, but understanding that we engage purchasing for those negotiations. Purchasing also oversees in our organization supplying disposables. I don't get into that world. I don't want to get into that world, but understanding if we're switching or if we're implementing a new piece of equipment, what are the disposables or supplies that go with that? The only time that I have gotten into that conversation recently is with our contract injectors because they're part of my replacement plan. And in some instances, we are now switching away from I'll call it a single use, and we're going to a bulk injector. Vendor helped us run some data, understand that the cost is actually more indicative of us using a bulk injector on some of them, and understanding what that then disposable price on contractors, all of that, tubing, all of that, what that looks like. That's the only time that I've gotten involved. And then we also look for purchasing to sign any of the necessary documents, POs, agreements, things like that. We have a financial transaction policy that dictates at what level you can sign for what amount. So we'll usually engage purchasing for that. Some of the project tools that we utilize. Our biggest one here is our work breakdown structure, or WBS. This can be as detailed or as high level as you want it to be. It essentially, and I have a picture of it, it essentially is, for us, an Excel spreadsheet that just lists out the tasks needing to be done. Is there a start date and a due date? Whose court is it in to do? And it just helps manage, because some of those projects, like the 3-year project, there's a lot to it, right? There's a lot to keep in mind, from renovating GI as part of the project to PACU, prep recovery, and IR system, renovating all of your surgical space, right? All the new ORs that we're going to be doing, sterile processing, we're also moving distribution, all of that. It's a lot to manage. You don't want to forget. So we utilize our work breakdown structure. We use OneNote, again, I meet weekly, and kind of goes back to some of the project meetings. I meet weekly with project manager, project coordinator. We use OneNote. We share between each other. So we always see the latest and greatest. So that's a good tool for us. We have equipment planning software. We recently switched. There's been a little bit of a learning curve for us, but again, that's the software where we're managing all medical and non-medical equipment. What all goes into a room? Yes. We had a Tania. We switched to 4-tower. As somebody who prior to the healthcare world did conversions and implementations in the financial world, I will tell you that the amount of customization in 4-tower that they allow all of their users to do scares me, because when they go to update something or put a new build out there, they're inevitably going to break something or someone, and they won't know. So they won't tell you, and you're going to figure it out. Now, is the price point a heck of a lot better? Oh yeah, we're saving over $50,000 a year. But it's one of those things where you get what you pay for. It's still I still like the product, but it's definitely a less mature product than a Tania. It'll get there eventually. It's just not there yet. It still meets our needs. We've got the issue tracker, like I mentioned before. I do have a shot of that. Project calendar, and I have a shot of this too. We have weekly biomed meetings, team meetings, biomed HTM. And we were getting asked a lot about various project dates, what's coming up. Our organization uses SharePoint for our collaborative sites. And so we created a project calendar where we map out as much as we know so that the guys, gals can go out there and see what's coming up. So that's been very helpful in the sheer fact of we get less of, hey, Lani, Rachel, Sarah, what's happening or when is this taking place? It's out on the calendar. And then project, oh yeah. No, that is internal to our department, because it really is more of just a notification for them. Operations is in the OAC meetings, and we do the look ahead, and our contractor sends out a detailed schedule, so they have already got that, but that's way more than our guys and gals need. And then project meetings. Like I said, I meet with project manager, project coordinator on a weekly basis. You have your OAC meetings that we have, again, depending on the size of the project. Is it every week, every other week? You may have meetings, again, internal just to the project managers, construction services, IT, biomed, HTM. So there are different meetings. There are usually a couple meetings per project that you're having. So here's a picture snippet of our work breakdown structure. So you'll see you have your task name here. Who are we assigning it to? I don't have on here the start complete date, but we track the percentage complete. And this is just a snippet of some of it. It goes on to, right, when are we going to procure equipment? When are they going to be delivered? When we need to move equipment out of the space, right? When's go live? When's applications training taking place? All of that good stuff. Again, you can make it as detailed or as high level as you want. It really is whatever your heart's desire. So here's a little bit more of what that looks like, right? Our equipment list. So when we do our equipment planning, we have our prelim list. We schedule meetings with operations to go through that. We'll update 4Tower based on what those meeting decisions were. We're talking quantity, placement, what room it's going to go into. We'll send that then to our architect and to our engineering firm, because when you export out of the software, you are able to include specs. So you're going to have mechanical, electrical, plumbing, spatial specs for all the necessary folks. So they have that and can plan for that. So again, and then, right, like if I'm needing to move or store equipment, am I storing it on site, off site? If I'm storing it off site, when do I need to schedule deliveries with the vendor? All that good stuff. Our calendar. Right now we're in the midst of replacing one of our linear accelerators, right? That's going to take us actually until April 4th is when we get the new one installed. So right now we're in our construction phase of that room. But then we've got here, right, February, just last week, we started phase 1 of our sterile processing for our integrated procedure space project. You'll see here then, earlier this week, we took out our old IR system. By the way, we're starting a clinic renovation, right? So it's a great snapshot for the internal staff. And I will say even leadership. So again, my director reports straight to the C-suite. If Brad has questions on what's taking place or what he's heard, right? Rob has some information here at his disposal. He can have that conversation, provide that to his leader. Issue tracker. So here we're able to call out what that issue is, right? I have in here what that priority is. Some of it's just kind of low-lying fruit. It's not too impactful of an issue, but it's still an issue. And then there are things that are just mission critical, right? That need to get resolved. Description of what that issue is. Who is it assigned to? I love putting down the vendor there and sending it to the vendor to remind them that it's their issue to deal with. Do I need to escalate it? Does it need to be expedited on their end? That X-ray vendor I was telling you about didn't feel like a lot of it needed to be escalated or expedited. We updated this to show a different story and shared it with him. We got some traction. What that resolution is. We track the resolution because if that situation happens again, we can refer back to this and have an idea of how to maybe troubleshoot it ourselves to fix the issue faster, right? So this is just a snippet of our issue tracker. I have templates of these, so if you want to reach out, I'm happy to share. I'm a supporter of my own tools. So kind of what's next for us, right? Refine the process. I'm a big process should always be evaluated. There's always room for opportunity to improve it. your environment or the organization's structure or there's so many things that can impact whether or not the process you're following today is still the process you could follow a year from now, 6 months from now, right? And as you dive into new processes, you're gonna find ways to make them better. So I'm always an advocate to my project manager and coordinator to say, this may be what it is today, but I want your feedback. How can we improve it to make everyone's lives easier? Because it's probably not a task that we should spend that much time on. I called it out earlier, track lessons learned. We used it when I was a project manager. I was in the IT PMO before I moved into Biomed and HTM. We always had a lessons learned, but we also did it not just internal to IT. We involved operations because we wanted to hear from operations. What did we do well and what could we have done better? And I want to spend more time on what could we do better to make sure that we actually improve on that the next time, right? Sometimes it's an iterative process, but I would highly recommend go to your operational leaders, get that feedback. It's hard to hear sometimes, but it's valuable in helping build that relationship, build that trust and your process. I want to create a project dashboard. So we use Navolo for our CMMS system. I want to have, and we open our work orders as project work orders for people to track time to. I'd like to create a project dashboard. So again, when our biomed manager, our supervisor, or Rob, our director, has a question of where we're at in a particular phase of a project, they can go see it's at their fingertips. If Rob's boss, Brad, has a question, it's at his fingertips. He can have that conversation versus I'll have to get back to you. Or he's frantically Teams messaging me for that update and I'm frantically Teams messaging him back, right? I think there's value in showing the dashboard. It's in the transparency. That's very important. So I'll look at that. I think as you execute your plans, your most valuable friends are communication and transparency. If you want people to trust you, if you want people to rise to the expectation that you have and not have some other expectation they think you need to rise to, you need to communicate. When you're running into an issue, it's a hard conversation to have sometimes, but you need to have a conversation because they're going to appreciate it in the long run, right? Most programs don't have the structure that we do where we have a dedicated project manager, project coordinator on these types of projects. Managing, and this is for replacement plans just as well as it is for any strategic plan that's coming down from the C-suite for something non-medical equipment related, right? But the value in wrapping your arms and putting your plan together to execute what you've just planned for the next 5 to 7 years. So I'll leave it at that. Any questions? No, quiet group. All right. That's all I've got.